So it's a big day in climate news.
And the bill, as amended, is passed.
The Senate had passed $3 billion of climate restoration.
Not just $3 billion, $370 billion, which is a lot. This news has a lot of climate activists very happy. It's the most significant climate legislation in ever. It dedicates tons of money towards changing the way that we produce electricity, overhauling our transportation sector. It throws down tax credits. It creates a new green bank. There's tons in here that a lot of climate wonks really like. You might notice, however, that there is some disagreement in the climate movement. There's some disagreement in the climate movement about... There's some disagreement... There's some disagreement... There's some You told me that you'd let me do it. There is some Riker. There is some division within the climate community about the impact of the bill, because there's a provision in this legislation that mandates that the Department of the Interior lease 2 million acres of land and 60 million acres of offshore waters to fossil fuel companies before it can lease land towards renewable energy projects, which is... It caps the time that an environmental review can take at 2 years, and it limits the ability for legal challenges to slow down energy projects. The people who are excited about this say for every ton of new emissions that may result from these leases to oil and gas companies, 24 tons of emissions are reduced. So we're getting up to 40% reduction in emissions by 2030 in the next 8 years. That's a huge deal. That's super important. The people who are upset about this are pointing out that the new leases are going to be in new lands that will have new frontline communities that have to deal with the worst effects of climate change. Everywhere from the Appalachian to the Arctic to Alaska, there's going to be new infrastructure that's going to be around for the next 60 years. And that's going to really screw a lot of people over. There's an argument to be made that there's real progress happening on the climate front, but on the backs of and at the cost of frontline communities. So the most nuanced perspectives that I've seen on this bill are that it's imperfect. It moves a lot of things forward in a really exciting way, while at the same time having serious flaws. Those flaws, say the climate wonks that I follow, are not things that anybody actually wanted, not any things that any members of the climate movement were shooting for. It was the requirement to get Joe Manchin on board. We had to appease this guy whose interests are in coal. And that's the reality of where we are. The point for optimism, in addition to all the reductions in emissions, is that just because these leases are made available doesn't mean that they will be bought. And just because they are bought does not mean that there will be developed. There's still a whole bunch of opportunities for the climate movement to insist on environmental reviews, to make constructing new infrastructure as costly as possible. And that's a thing that the climate community can do and can continue to do, so as not to sacrifice people who are on the front lines, fence lines communities that are going to be dealing with this new infrastructure. So, on the whole, it's an important bill. It's a major step forward in terms of reducing emissions. It's critical, but it's flawed, and there's certainly things that the climate movement needs to do in order to mitigate the harms that come out of it.